Hello, everyone. Welcome to Sociology 2017, Communication, Power, and Capital. My name is Professor Gillian McCann, and I want in this lecture to go over the course, the sort of overview of the course, what I'm hoping that we are discussing and what you're taking from it. And then I'll be going over the syllabus, and we'll start full lectures next week. I'll be posting weekly with discussion boards weekly. So many of you will be coming from sociology, although I'm not going to learn that till I ask you on the discussion boards. It's great to have people from all disciplines, but what I wanted to talk a little bit about is the overview. And so what is sociology? And so sociology is the study of human beings in a group. And so this makes it different than, for instance, psychology, where it tends to be about the individual. And those things obviously come into discussion with one another. But it certainly looks at human behavior in relationship, and that can take many forms, including families, mobs, organized crime, different sub-communities, and religious traditions. I actually come from the discipline of religious studies, and so we will be doing a whole component on religion and sociology, which unfortunately often gets ignored, although I do think that's changing. We'll talk about that. So sociology allows us to think critically about the world we're living in, and of course that's what I'm expecting you to be doing throughout as we move through the material, and to look at the dynamics of power in the world. And I think this is one of the kind of most important aspects of sociology, that it allows us to look at how power works within society, and how it comes through politics, and how it comes into human life. And so sociology does come from a variety of different places, and so there are European schools, Canadian and American, and so obviously we're in Canada. I'm hoping to have a Canadian slant here as much as I can. The textbook is written by a Canadian. That's one of the reasons that I picked it, and more on that later. So we're going to be looking at kind of the building blocks of social theory. So this is a theory course. I do want to say at the outset that I am not somebody who's interested in theory for theory's sake. I find that a very annoying approach. I look at theory as a way, a lens of looking at the world, or a tool for analyzing what's going on in the world. And so that's the way I'm going to be approaching it as we go. This is part of sociology, and so we're going to be covering sort of all the main thinkers, so that you have a grasp, at least an idea of what they're talking about. So in the course description in the syllabus, I say this is an introduction to influential schools of thought within modern social theory. Okay, and so I'm going to begin with the historical background. And so again, I want to contextualize this, and as I've put the land acknowledgement that we live within the Robinson-Huron Treaty of 1850, that Nipissing has been undergoing a process of decolonization, which is extremely challenging, and something that I take very seriously. And so this doesn't sit comfortably with many of the disciplines within the humanities, and so I'm going to be adding it into the course as we go, because much of sociology acts like that doesn't exist, and so I will be adding that in. So when we look at the historical background, we're going to be looking at things like colonization and how that impacts. So we're going to be looking at the development of the Enlightenment, the Industrial Revolution, and how that leads us, the French Revolution, how that leads us into modern and contemporary social theory. So we're going to be looking at a variety of frameworks, including functionalism, symbolic interactionism, Marxism, globalization, feminism, among others. And so obviously we can't go completely in depth with all of them, but I do need you to have a basic understanding of all of them. So we're going to be discussing, as I said, decolonization, critical race theory, and how this fits or doesn't fit within these frameworks. In this class, we're going to be there's going to be an emphasis on how social order is produced. Most of us live within our society and don't necessarily think much about it or how it came to be. And again, this is one of the great strengths of sociology. We can look at things like social class and how that shapes our reality. So it's very important to me that as part of this class, you're able to look out on your own experience and the world around you in a more critical way. So I do want to move us through the syllabus, and so the required reading is Understanding Society, A Survey of Modern Social Theory by Douglas Mann, and this is an ongoing issue with I think almost every professor, that there's never a perfect textbook. It doesn't exist. I've come to that conclusion. And so I'm going to be in a kind of dialogue with this text because there are times when I really have a bone to pick with Dr. Mann. So that's fine. That is what academics is all about. Professors and researchers don't always agree. What I will say about this textbook is he has taken a huge amount of information and made it understandable. And in looking over my choices, there's very little out there that does that. A lot of it is just excerpts from text, which doesn't put anything in a context, which is very important for this course. So we will be using his textbook, and I'll be adding in, this is the whole point of having a professor, I'll be adding in my own material as well, and as I said, putting in a kind of context. So you'll be expected to be reading through this as we move through. And then as a recommended reading, I have the dreaded research paper by Larry Patrican, who was actually a professor at Nipissing until recently. He's just retired. And he's written a very short, very readable book called The Dreaded Research Paper, and I highly recommend it for anybody in the humanities. It's actually funny, which is quite admirable in any kind of academic text. So he has all the sort of basic building blocks of how to write a research paper in that book if you feel that you need help with that. And obviously we have other sort of places you can go at Nipissing for help with research and writing. And I am available again by email. We could have a Zoom meeting if you have any questions about that. Okay, so I want to look at the methods of evaluation, and you can see on the syllabus the first assignment is going to be on these foundational thinkers of sociology, who are Durkheim and Weber, worth 15%, and I want you to use that assignment as a chance to go a little bit in depth with the thought of these two very important thinkers. You choose one or the other. I'm not asking you to do both. And then the second assignment is a media and the contemporary world assignment, and you'll be using a framework that we're going to be talking about, particularly Marshall McLuhan and Heather Menzies, who are both Canadians. And this is obviously extremely important in the world we're living in, and this is something that I think that sociology is having to grapple with, that many of these foundational theories didn't take into account the sort of information revolution that we have lived through and the way that so many things are online now. And so I will be focusing on that in a way that he doesn't in the textbook, because I think that's very important for all of us in our lived experience. I was just reading an article about, it was actually criticizing boomers for not being able to get off their phone, and that people are at Thanksgiving and, you know, their grandfather's on the phone and his phone is beeping. So I'm certainly not saying it's just young people that have fallen prey to this complete addiction to social media and their phones. Some of you who've been in my classes know I've been fighting a rearguard action against this my whole career. So anyway, the sociology allows us to look at this critically and how this is impacting so many aspects of our lives. I just give you the example of there's been research done in many Western countries on the rise of many mental illnesses such as anxiety and depression, and also just the phenomenon of loneliness. And so I will be using Durkheim's idea of anomie, but also how has the internet also contributed to this kind of loneliness epidemic that we're seeing, and what are the kind of potential collateral damage from this, that we're all living through a gigantic social experiment here. So I'll be interested to hear what you think about that, because obviously I think for most of you, you've grown up completely in the world of social media. So the second assignment will be a media assignment. Then you'll have a final essay, and this is where you can choose from the list I give you, or you can choose your own topic. If you're not sure, I invite you to get in touch with me and we can go over it and kind of figure out based on your idea what the topic could be. And as I said, it's always more interesting for you if you choose a topic that you find interesting. So then there's a final exam. That time will be announced once the schedule is out, and then participation is 10%, and that is the discussion boards, consists in the discussion boards. So I have here the expectations of the course. So I want you to understand contemporary theories that are discussed in the class and in the readings. Ability to identify key ideas, concepts, and theories and how they apply in the contemporary world. So that is very important, that idea of application. So as I said, I'm not just interested in theory, it's how can we apply it. Evaluate some of the major debates and thinkers within contemporary sociological theory. So it's interesting to look at how some of these theories have aged. This is always an issue in every discipline. I struggle with this all the time when I teach theory from the 19th century, that it comes replete with its own, baggage, as all theory does, and language that we don't use anymore, and so on. So how relevant is this some of this foundational theory? You'll come to your own conclusions on that. Demonstrate an understanding of the economic, social, and political circumstances that shaped and shape sociological theory. And I think this is very important, that sociology didn't just, fall from the sky. It was created by people. People have their own biases. They're within their own context and shaped by their history and so on. So apply your understanding of contemporary theory as a means of interpreting the events happening in the world today. So that idea, again, that you can look out onto the world you're in and be able to apply these theories. So I have a longer description of the assignments here, and very important, I have to say this every time, that in courses, in university courses, unless they're popular culture courses or something like that, you have to use peer-reviewed sources. If you don't, I will be handing it back to you. And so I know many of you know what I mean by that, but in case you don't, it means that they are reviewed by academics. So when an article or book goes in, when it's academic, it has to be reviewed to make sure that that information is accurate. And so the easiest way to do this is just to use the Nipissing University website. It actually tells you if it's peer-reviewed when it brings up the citation. And so I'll just give you an example. I know most of you know this. Wikipedia, National Geographic, Time Magazine, these are not peer-reviewed. Now, you can use, for instance, a newspaper article to kind of lead into the topic. I often do that. But it doesn't count towards when I'm counting the sources, okay? So if you have any questions about that, you should contact me, because as I said, if you don't use peer-reviewed sources that you cite in the paper, I will have to hand it back to you to redo it, and which is, obviously you don't want to be in that situation. So you have to use APA or MLA forms of citation, or again, I will have to hand it back to you. So the citation isn't there to torture you. It's there for me to know that you're actually using the research that you've done. And I probably don't have to say this, but you can't write a good paper if you haven't done good research. Okay, so I'm going to just move on to participation. And so participation will be based on 6 substantive posts on the discussion boards. Now, you don't have to cite sources on discussion boards, but what I mean by that, I'm sure, again, most of you know this already, but it isn't just saying when somebody posts, good post, I enjoyed your post. You have to say something substantive that shows thought about the topic. It is really great in the discussion boards when you engage with one another, but it has to be substantive for me to count it. Again, probably don't have to say this, but plagiarism, zero tolerance. You can read through that policy on your own, and this includes AI. I just want to say here for the record, again, we're living through this. This is probably a good topic for papers, AI. AI is bad writing because it's just gleaning bits and pieces from the internet. And I can tell as soon as I read it, it has this weird fluffy quality of being from nowhere. So it's very bad writing. And so there's not really a lot of use in it, as far as I can tell, other than making the internet a bigger swamp than it already is. So familiarize yourself with the plagiarism policy. Okay, so I want to just go over for the last part of this, the sections of the course. As I said, I'll be posting every week. And again, if you have any questions or issues, you can email me and we can set up a meeting, or I can just reply by email. Okay, so the first week will be an introduction to social theory, history, and context. And so you can see the required readings there are following along in your textbook. And this gives us more of the kind of historical space from which these theories emerge. Sociology didn't exist, for instance, in the 1600s. So it emerges out of a very specific kind of alongside modernity, essentially. So we will be talking about that. Then the next week we'll be looking at foundational thinkers of sociology, Emile Durkheim and Max Weber. So Durkheim being a French social thinker, and Weber being German. And so I'm going to be talking about both of them in detail, and they're an example for me of thinkers that remain completely relevant into the present, and that's why I'm putting them front stage center here. That both of them were great humanists. They were both very concerned with what was happening within their own societies. And so that very much shows in their work. And so we'll be going over them in quite a bit of detail. And of course, your first assignment will be on choosing one or the other of them. So we're going to then look at one of the first schools of thought, functionalism and its critics. And this is something that I do like about the textbook, that each group, he also includes its critics. So as I said, this is what academics is. It's an ongoing conversation. It's not, for me anyway, it's not about picking a team. I always go by Wendy Donager's idea of the toolbox, that you use the tools that are most useful for a certain topic. So functionalism is very, very popular in the kind of mid 20th century, and we're going to look at it and then some of the critiques. We'll then be looking at Marxism, materialism, and social thought. So Marx is often included as one of the foundational thinkers of sociology, so I'm going to be talking in some detail about the thought of Karl Marx, and his thought and writing is an example of how this has completely influenced society and continues to into the present day. We have communist China, for instance, and so the Soviet Union no longer exists, but was, of course, the cause of the creation of the Soviet Union, and continues to be influential in critical social thought. So I will be spending a lot of time on Marx and Marxist thinkers. We're then going to look at, this puts it a little out of order because I need you to have this material under your belt before you do the next assignment, which will be a media assignment. So the global village, media, theory, and social thought. And so the key thinker in this is the Canadian Marshall McLuhan, and we'll be spending quite a bit of time on his theories, which, if anything, are more relevant today than they were when he was writing. He was very critical of how media was beginning to affect society, and I can only imagine what he would have thought looking out on it now. So he was definitely being prophetic in terms of how media was going to be reshaping society. Then we have study week. There's no class or lecture. Then when we come back, critiques of contemporary culture, and then meaning and social agency. Then we'll move on to looking at religion and sociology, the symbolic and social construction of reality. And for this section, I'll be highlighting Peter Berger, who passed away recently, who's one of the most important thinkers in this field, but I'll be looking at other people as well. And during this section, I'm going to be looking at what some of you may have heard of this, the secularization hypothesis. So sociology was one of the key areas that brought forward the idea of the secularization hypothesis, the idea that religion is dying and losing influence. And so Peter Berger actually recanted. He was one of these people and recanted. So this is a very interesting case of where somebody changes their mind, partly because he looked out on the world and saw that religion was not disappearing. So of course, we're going to look at this in more detail. Again, your textbook has almost nothing to say about this, so this is the section that I'm adding in because I think it's obviously very important. And just to give you an example, and some of you may have had classes with me, well over 80% of the world is still religious, so this is clearly the idea that religion is disappearing, losing influence is not the case. And I don't want to look at it just through the lens of the dangers of religion and the rise of the far right, although we are going to look at that. It's the idea that religion is part of life for the vast majority of people. So we're going to be looking at postmodernism and structuralism, then feminism, race, and decolonization. And then we're going to conclude with globalization theory and a course review. So I'll be setting you up for the exam. So the whole idea of the exam is that I want to see that you've been understanding the material that we've been covering in these lectures and in the textbook. Okay, so I hope that's clear. I really look forward to reading your posts in the introduction section and finding out more about you. And again, if you have any questions, you can contact me, and I will be planning to post next week.